Good evening and welcome to tonight's special presentation on the 25th anniversary of the Karabakh movement. It's a pleasure to be here this evening with you and to introduce our special guest. But first I would like to again thank all of you for coming out on a Friday night. For the students especially, next week is our spring break, so we don't have classes, so it's very nice to see the students here as well. Tonight's presentation is co-sponsored by the Armenian Studies program and by the Armenian National Committee of America, Central California, and the Armenian Students Organization. At this time, I would like to invite Paul Jamushian from the Armenian National Committee to say a few words. Paul?
At my age, while I was afraid I'd fall, I'd like to add to what Barlow said. Thank you for being here. By virtue of your being here, you show an interest in Karabakh, and that's wonderful. This gathering started, believe it or not, in October of last year. We met with Robert Avetisyan, who is the representative from Karabakh to the United States. And my hope was that we would get people in Fresno exposed to, more knowledgeable about Karabakh, what it is, why it is, and just be more knowledgeable about that. I hope for two things from you. One, to listen and learn about Karabakh and ask questions. He can handle the questions. We've interviewed him with people, and he's very good at answering questions. Please learn whatever you can about Karabakh. Secondly, please let me ask that you tell your friends, your families, what Karabakh is, what this flag is, and what Artsakh is. Everybody says it's either mountainous Nagorno Karabakh or Artsakh. Learn the difference. I'm sure he'll give some background to you. Anyway, thank you very much for doing this. I'd also like to thank the Fresno Bee for an excellent op-ed by him that I hope all of you read. And I would be remiss in not thanking Barlow. Putting this together was no easy thing. He's very good with making those charts, showing the thing. The toughest thing we had to do in putting together the flyers was getting his picture so we could put it on the flyer. Anyway, thank you for doing that. Before I leave, I want to introduce a representative from Congressman Costa's office. And why are we doing this? The Azeris are putting on a full court press on Karabakh. A full court press. They're hiring with their vast oil monies lobbyists in D.C., even in California. California, where we know there's a lot of Armenians, they're taking us on. And we asked on the 25th anniversary for the various congressmen to make statements. As part of that, the ambassador from Azerbaijan wrote to all the congressmen, including Costa, saying, don't do this. I won't get into the detail, but it was a bunch of BS. Despite this, let's say, challenge to them, a number of them, Nunes did it, Valadeo did it, and Jim did the best. But they did it under threat, exploitation, etc. So I think it's wonderful that they did this in recognition of the Armenians in their districts. And so I want you to understand why we're asking that in front of this audience, they read part of what went into the congressional record. And I want to ask Melissa Mata to come up here on behalf of Jim.
Good evening, my name is Melissa Mata, and I'll read you a part of this congressional record that was read on the floor of the House of Representatives. And please forgive me if I mispronounce a couple of words. What's that? Oh. Mr. Speaker, today I rise to recognize the 25th anniversary of the pogroms against the people of Armenian descent in Sungay, Azerbaijan. This ungodly massacre in 1988 resulted in the murder of scores of Armenians. Tragically, women and girls were viciously raped, and hundreds of Armenians were wounded. The chaos led to thousands of Armenian refugees who were left without homes or livelihoods. It was from the ashes of these terrible fires that arose the Nagorno Karabakh democracy movement that has, after many terrible years of war, blockades, and aggression, resulted in hard-won freedom and democracy for the proud citizen of this Christian land. Today I ask my colleagues to stand with the proud people who have risen up for their rights, who share so many of the same foundational ideals, including a commitment to the values of freedom, human rights, self-determination, and democracy.
I'd like to now bring our great Barlow back up. Thank you very much for all you guys did. Thank you, Barlow. He'll introduce the speaker.
Thank you, Paul. I would also like to say that our county supervisor for District 2, Andreas Borges, also gave a special certificate of recognition to Mr. Avetisyan at a special ceremony yesterday. So I want to thank Andreas Borges for that as well. Tonight, we have a very special guest, Mr. Robert Avetisyan from Washington, D.C. The Karabakh Liberation Movement began on February 20th, 1988, when the Nagorno Karabakh Council of Deputies applied to the Supreme Councils of Soviet Azerbaijan and Armenia for a decision on secession of the Nagorno Karabakh from Azerbaijan and its integration with Armenia. With this action began a momentous year in the history of the Armenian people, in Armenia and in Karabakh. Within 3 years, the people of Armenia would vote for their independence and freedom from the Soviet Union. For Karabakh, however, the road was more difficult with war and hardship. Our guest this evening will speak about the history and current status of the liberation movement. Mr. Avetisyan was born in Stepanakert, which is the capital of Nagorno Karabakh, and graduated from the Artsakh State University in Stepanakert. Since August of 1999, he has been working in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Nagorno Karabakh Republic, serving in different positions of the ministry's analytical and political departments. In 2006, Mr. Avetisyan completed a special course at the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy at Tufts University. And in 2008, he was appointed counselor of the NKR Permanent Representation in the United States. In February of 2009, by decree of the NKR president, Bako Sahakian, Avetisyan was appointed permanent representative of the Nagorno Karabakh Republic to the United States. Since 1997, the NKR Republic has maintained a representation office in Washington, D.C., and Mr. Avetisyan is the chief executive officer there. Բարոն Ավետիսյանը իր ելույթի պիտի խոսի անգլերենով, բայց իր ելույթեն ամիջապես հետո ինքը հայերենով կամ փոփե իր խոսքերը եւ հետո ժամանակ ունենա ձեր հարցումներուն, ինքը պատրաստ է ձեր բոլոր հարցումներուն պատասխանել. It is my pleasure to introduce Mr. Robert Avetisyan, the special representative of the Nagorno Karabakh Republic to the United States. Mr. Avetisyan.
Thank you very much. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, dear guests. I also want to start by thanking the organizers of this event, the Armenian Studies Program of the Fresno State University, while personally thanking for everything they've done, Paul Jamushan, who are great political staff, and the Armenian National Committee of America. And of course everyone for being here with us today in Calgary. Thanks. Thanks for being here. I realize that this is the first attempt to talk, at least in the recent period, to talk about Karabakh, and I appreciate your presence. This is very inspiring. I also hope, like Paul said, that you will take the information you hear today to your families, to your friends, to your colleagues, and just keep in mind that Artsakh, which is the ancient Armenian name for Karabakh, is interested to have a global awareness about us, because we're sure that our cause is right. We have a very strong legal, historical, and moral basis for claiming what we claim now, namely the right to live in freedom and dignity, nothing extra. As Paolo has mentioned, the Karabakh conflict is one of the most severe conflicts in the post-Soviet period, but the story began in the early 20th century, when the Russian Empire collapsed and the new creations like Azerbaijani Republic and Armenian Republic and Georgia had the issue of demarcation of state borders, or the new borders. Azerbaijan, which first appeared on the political map in 1918, began to claim significant lands of its neighbors. The Karabakh was among them. They failed to incorporate Karabakh on state level, despite all the political and economic favorable situation among them. And the League of Nations, which was the antecedent of the United Nations, it did not recognize Karabakh as part of Azerbaijan, despite the claims. It recognized Nagorno Karabakh as a disputed territory, and the status was attached to this piece of land up until the region was Sovietized, up until the communists came and formed the Soviet Union in the entire territory. So in 1921, the communist body decided to leave us and recognize us as part of Armenia, as we have been for centuries prior to that. And practically on the next day, we're seeing another decision by Stalin. I'm sure many of you have heard about that. And he took this very self-will in violation of all the existing norms and mechanisms. He said that Nagorno Karabakh should be placed under the administration of Soviet Azerbaijan. Karabakh population, of course, resisted this development and raised their voice and said that they're not going to accept the reality. And as a kind of compromise, we were given the right to form an autonomous oblast. So we were eventually appeared to be an autonomy, an Armenian autonomy in the Soviet Republic of Azerbaijan. But this was the only period of our common history when Nagorno Karabakh and Azerbaijan were part of the same territorial division. So this was all only within the Soviet Union and never before that. Independent Azerbaijan never had Nagorno Karabakh in its constitution. The decades of Soviet existence, they were tough for us. Azerbaijan did whatever they could to change the demographic situation, to change the numbers. There's several indicators. When Azerbaijanis were forming only 3% of the population of Nagorno-Karabakh by 1923, according to the last population census in 1989, they were forming only 21%. So their population increased sevenfold, while the Armenian portion of the population didn't increase. By the level of the president of Azerbaijan, various periods of time, they were accepting that their policy was to change the demographic feature of the region and make it predominantly Azerbaijani. Their intention was clear. They were planning to implement what they did in Nakhchivan, to eliminate any presence of Armenian history, of Armenian centuries of Armenian presence there. They were planning to destroy whatever could resemble even the slightest evidence that Armenians have been populating here for so long. Throughout the Soviet times even, Karabakhis were raising their voice, especially in 1935, 1965, 67, and 73, as far as I remember, before the final stage. They were addressing the Soviet authorities in Azerbaijan, in Armenia, and in Moscow to revert the injustice, to bring us back into Armenia. But of course, those of you who have lived in the Soviet Union know that there was a policy declared of brotherhood among nations, and it didn't tolerate even the slightest evidence of nationalism. So all the movements were eventually suppressed up until 1988. Actually, by mid-1980s, when the Gorbachev came and he declared the era of perestroika and glasnost, so he was trying to bring more democracy in the area. We took the chance and appealed again before the communist organs in these three capitals. The result was very cruel and very tragic. Just a week after Karabakh held their first peaceful manifestation in Stepanakert, we had the events in Sumgait, which the country mentions in this hundreds of miles away from Karabakh. Has nothing to do with the Nagorno Karabakh country. Has nothing to do geographically with Nagorno Karabakh. Sumgait is the second largest industrial city in Azerbaijan, under 100% controlled by Azerbaijani law enforcement and political leadership. So the Armenian minority of that was murdered and subject to inhuman tortures just for being Armenians. And there were many cases when we were discussing this issue with the new generation of the Armenians in the United States, and it's hard for them to believe that. Actually, the young lady said, I don't believe. I cannot imagine that Armenians were persecuted just for being Armenian. I said, well, history is repeating sometimes. Of course, it's a big tragedy, but we have to pick the lessons from that. The Sumgait tragedy turned everything into a bloody confrontation. We realized that this is not going to be a civilized dialogue. We realized that Moscow is turning a deaf ear, and it was us who had to take care about ourselves, only us. By that time, the entire international community was against this. They were saying, you cannot stand a single day. You were enclaved in Azerbaijan, oil-rich Azerbaijan, which has political support in Moscow and some regional powers. You cannot stand it. But that was the only way for us to survive. And we took a chance. As the Soviet Union was beginning to disintegrate, and as we saw that Moscow was not going to interfere actively in this issue, we looked into the existing constitution, which provided us with the possibility to proclaim independence. So the sovereignty, that's how we changed the movement from the initial demand for reunification with Armenia into proclaiming independence. There was no any mechanism for reunification with Armenia without the consent of the communist authorities, but there was a procedure of obtaining sovereignty which didn't require such. So we went for the second option because we wanted throughout our movement, and even now we are doing our best to be in line with the acting legislation. We are trying to be legally impeccable. We know that the legitimacy of our claims is very important, and it will be always studied by, especially by our adversary. So, in an effort to be in line with law and international norms, we proclaimed the intention to form our sovereignty, which we did in 1991, despite the threat of military aggression. We proclaimed the formation of the Nagorno Karabakh Republic. Azerbaijan replied with full-scale military aggression. That was very much predictable. Azerbaijan felt absolutely there was an impunity towards Azerbaijan. They thought they could do whatever they wanted with this piece of land, and the threats were very open. The military disbalance was pretty much in favor of Azerbaijan. The geographical location was the worst you can imagine. We were surrounded and encircled. Actually, we were blockaded by the hostile people towards us. Yet, through enormous sacrifice, and many people call it a miracle, but of course, it's a bravery, and it's one of the most perfect examples of the unity of the Armenian nation. We could protect our homes and eventually force the aggressors into a ceasefire. which was signed in 1994 with the representatives of Azerbaijan, Armenia, and Nagorno Karabakh Republic. And I underline that Republic. Nagorno Karabakh Republic as an independent state was already then recognized by Azerbaijan on state level. They were conducting direct negotiations. They were sending their delegates. Aliyev, the father of the incumbent president, he was delegating his defense minister at the time to talk to representatives of the Nagorno Karabakh Republic, and we have the letters. This is something we can very easily prove. Unfortunately, today Azerbaijan refuses to build on the process which was up until 1998, when there were immediate negotiations between the Nagorno-Karabakh Republic and Azerbaijan. They tried to present this conflict as the one between Armenia and Azerbaijan, because this is how they distort the essence of the conflict, and they say that this is not a freedom movement, this is not a self-determination movement. This is Armenia's territorial claim towards Azerbaijan, which is much negatively perceived by the international community. We all witnessed almost several cases a decade when new states appear on the political map, and most of them are as a result of self-determination and freedom movement. To prevent this natural course of events, Azerbaijan is trying to keep this in the Armenia-Azerbaijan dimension by refusing the very existence of the Nagorno-Karabakh as a factor, despite the fact that we are co-signatories of the ceasefire. The conflict is dealt by the international community. The Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, the OSCE, has been dealing with this since 1992. It has developed a special vehicle, a special format, which is called the Minsk Group. Minsk is the country, is the capital of former Soviet Republic of Belarus. And the forum on the Karabakh issue was supposed to take place there, which never happened, but the format which was supposed to be there took this name. So the Minsk Group deals with the Nagorno-Karabakh negotiation process, and it is co-chaired by the three permanent co-chairs, the United States, Russia, and France. They maintain offices in the three capitals, Stepanakert, Yerevan, and Baku. They pay regular visits. They meet with our authorities. One of them was 3 days ago. They met with the Karabakh president and delivered the most recent messages to the parts. They're trying to bring the sides together, but unfortunately the biggest achievement so far is the relative peace. Non-resumption of active hostilities remains the biggest achievement. It's not because we don't want that. No, we are ready for peace. We said on many occasions that we are ready to discuss any issue, no matter how painful it is for us. We are ready, even after being subject to aggression, we're extending our hand to other Azerbaijanis. We're trying to talk to them. We know that trust is essential among the people. But unfortunately, Armenians have proved that one hand doesn't clap. We need both sides to be constructively involved to get to somewhere. The war, it was devastating for us. It ruined almost the entire island. All of its infrastructure, social, educational, medical, it was ruined out. And since the ceasefire of '94, of course, we returned to the rebuilding our lives, which was very tough. And at the same time, we had to maintain very capable armed forces to prevent any revanchist attempts from Azerbaijan. And this is especially when we saw the participation of all the Armenians in this process. This was the time period when the All-Armenian Fund Hayastan was created to restore Karabakh. To restore Armenia, but of course the main impact was going to be directed into Karabakh. And the results are pretty impressive. We now can say that we have eliminated all the consequences of war. We are not on the edge of the humanitarian crisis anymore, and we are entering the phase of steady development. Still much needs to be done, of course, but the prospects are pretty inspiring for us and the people living in Afghanistan. Traditionally, agricultural land, Karabakh, is now trying to explore new directions, new economic directions, and one of them is mining. After the conflict, well, after the active phase of the conflict, after everything more or less settled down, we tried to explore the advantages we may have to restore our own life, because we didn't have oil, we don't have oil, we don't have a steady source of income other than the taxation of the regular stuff any country does. Of course, we have assistance from Armenia, but Armenia itself is not in a situation that can finance all the projects that may be required for restoration of the normal pace of life. So we found that Artsakh is pretty rich in gold, in coal, in copper. And for already more than a decade, the mining companies, they are the #1 taxpayers. With that said, our authorities try to be very responsible because we value the environment we have, and we are doing everything in a way that we can minimize the impact on the environment in Artsakh. There is also a foundation for future generations, which has been established recently, to provide that the natural resources of Karabakh are used in a long-term basis, that the benefits will be equally distributed among the population, among several generations to come. Mining, agriculture, and hydropower stations. We are generating electricity now. Artsakh generates about 70% of our own consumption. With this, we are planning to become energy exporters in several years. Of course, it doesn't mean that everything is very good in Artsakh, or we have reached the state of welfare, or we already have created the conditions we were fighting for. No, but we can say clearly that we didn't fail our quest for independence. We can say that the trend is positive. We can register that Artsakh sees increasing population for 7th consecutive year. Even in the 2008 period, when the rest of the world was registering economic downturn, we registered almost 6% of economic growth. So we're doing our best to keep developing and make this process, if possible, irreversible. We understand the burden of paying such a high price for this freedom, and we know that the only way to keep the people living there is to provide them with the dignity and the security everyone deserves. So this is the #1 issue for us, and Artsakh will remain a socially oriented country. The biggest problem, not the only, but the biggest challenge, the existing challenge, is of course Azerbaijan's aggressive stance. Every day, from various media sources, all we hear is just, we're going to sell some more oil, we're going to buy more effective arms, and we're coming to get to there. Every day they think that they can scare us up, they can force us to leave, they can prevent us from visiting us, they can prevent us from making plans and connecting us to this land. But it's not, of course, it's not working. The only result is very negative for their society themselves. They're poisoning their young people, unfortunately. This is not the way we see out of the situation. We're trying to get in touch with them. We're trying to talk to them. We're trying to free kind of their society from this poison which is poured from the state apparatus and the propaganda machine into the ordinary people. But from the other side, if we see that one of the recent examples, when a guy, an Armenian and an Azerbaijani guy, they were part of the NATO-sponsored program in Hungary. Armenian guy, he was sleeping, and he was axed. His head was, well, he was murdered by an axe. And he's proclaimed hero in Azerbaijan. They bought him back from Hungarian system. They paid for that. They took him. They paid his salary for the 8 years he was in prison. They awarded him with an apartment in downtown Baku. They gave him all the benefits one can imagine, and they raised him in a military rank and proclaimed him a hero, an example for the future generation. second example. An intelligent person, a writer, said that we have to apologize before the Armenians for everything we have perpetrated in Sumgait. And that's it. That was enough for turning an entire hatred toward that guy, a poor Azerbaijani person who is now threatened with having his ear cut. And the pro-governmental organization, a party, political party, they offered, I think, $12,500 for anyone who can cut his ear. So this is just to explain the conditions and the signals we get from Azerbaijan. When we hoped that Azerbaijani society may think otherwise, we got the news that 16 non-governmental organizations in Azerbaijan have formed a coalition for war. Honestly, I haven't heard the second case when the non-governmental organizations advocate for war. This is what we have. This is what we have to handle, and but it doesn't affect our determination. We still believe that the toughest times have passed for us, and no matter how many weapons they may buy, Azerbaijan cannot reach this balance as was present in 1991. Neither geographically, neither politically, nor militarily. And this balance of powers, the relative balance of powers, is probably the only tangible reason why Azerbaijan is not resuming its hostilities against Nagorno Karabakh. Even in those conditions of the permanent threat, even in those conditions that they're doing whatever they can, even my appearance here, they want to prevent Arabasis to speak about our country. They want us not to be heard. They want the rest of the world to follow Azerbaijan's example, to shut people's mouths, to forbid them from speaking, to forbid them from traveling, from using airplanes, from using cell phones, from using clean potable water. That is bad if it comes to Armenians. That is bad as of now. Despite that, despite the fact that we have this unpredictable neighbor to the east, we're continuing to develop as a pretty open society with very impressive, believe me, impressive democratic achievements. And this is registered also not only by the local human rights watchdogs, but also by those from the rest of the democratic world, including the United States. Since proclaiming independence, we had several rounds of elections on various levels, starting from local self-administration bodies. The mayors of the cities are elected, not appointed, coming up to the president, and all of them were praised as free and transparent by hundreds of international observers, including, again, those from the United States. The most recent case was last year when the presidential elections were observed by an unprecedented 122 observers from 22 countries. Again, the assessment was very good, which inspired us and made us feel very, very satisfied. The Freedom House, one of the most influential human rights watchdogs, they also rank us as party free, and they put us in a much better condition than regional countries, especially totalitarian Azerbaijan. So this is just to show that we have chosen an absolutely different way of developing ourselves as a nation, as a society, and as a regional player. We haven't done anything which can undermine the regional security. We always try to follow our commitment to play a constructive role in the negotiations. We don't want to undermine international efforts. And I think the world is increasingly appreciating this. We hear some assessments from the observers and from the mediators and everyone who is dealing with the conflict. They are pretty well represented in Washington, D.C., many think tanks. They all said that, yes, the Armenian sides have been doing pretty constructively, and we have been following our signature, we have been following all the commitments we take. As a result of all our efforts, joined of course, and I know that many of you have participated in the restoration of Artsakh, for which we thank you from the bottom of our hearts. As a result of that, we today have a viable state, small, hard to reach. We know the tough side of this, but it's viable. It's viable. As I said, its population is growing, not in big absolute numbers, but still the trend is positive, which is very important considering the regional situation. With our own economic difficulties, with our own social difficulties, we still are open to the rest of the world. We are inviting the rest of the international community to visit us, to share their experience, to teach us how to do even better. We never close the door before anyone. And we proved that when our neighbors to the east, Azerbaijan, said that it's not a time for democracy because the conflict is still on, we proved that, of course, it's not the reality. You can do much better democratically. And we proved it even being under almost a permanent threat of military aggression. What the world can do, the international community can take a more responsible and more firm position on this. We always expect from the mediators, from the wider international community, that they will name the aggressor for what they are, that they will name the party who is undermining the international efforts, that it will not restrict itself with ambiguity, that there is such a comfortable layer of diplomatic ambiguity, which is not working in our case, because Azerbaijan is getting an absolutely different signal. They think that they can go along with another aggression. In the meantime, we do our best to maintain the strong state. We do our best to maintain capable armed forces. We do our best to develop as a piece of all the Armenians' historical homeland. We are developing our tourist infrastructure. Already now you can stay in Karabakh in the hotels which are clean and hospitable, and starting will range from 15 bucks and going up to the high-end 5-star hotels. You can find anything you got used to here. You can find free Wi-Fi in the central part of Sivan here. You can find, well, Nagorno Karabakh is the only I know country which has, during the 20 years of its existence as an independent state, and deprived of international or wide international assistance. We are the only country which has registered 0 cases of attacks on visitors. 0. And we're having around 16,000. We had about 16,000 tourists last year. Well, I want to use this opportunity to thank all of those who have been to Karabakh, because, yeah, I see your hand. Oh, shut up. It's very vibrant. It changes every month. We know that it's tough to reach, but it's a very good chance to see all of Armenia practically. You see the historical sites. Probably many of you know that the first Armenian school was opened in Artsakh's Martuni region. Mr. Mashtos has opened it and was teaching the first lessons. And there is even there are several letters still on the ceiling. When the kids didn't know how to write this or that letter, they used to look up. So they stick all of them on the top, and you can still distinguish some of them. We have an incredible historical heritage, which is yours, which is, we preserve it. We try to follow all the rules, international rules, on preserving the cultural heritage, which is non-Armenian or non-Christian. We don't have any problems with that. It's still ours. We know that we are responsible for keeping them intact. It's under protection. But the priority, of course, goes with the resources we have. Priority, of course, goes to restoration of everything we have been forbidden to follow for such a long time. I want to, again, going back to thanking you for being part of Artsakh life. I want to assure you that your efforts haven't gone in vain, and the best way is, of course, to go and witness everything with your own eyes. So I want to take this chance to invite all of you to Karabakh anytime convenient for you. We have winters, that's the biggest surprise for Fresno population, but we do have the 4 seasons, the normally kind of round the year weather, but you will love it. You will love it, and I'm trying not to be subjective. Yes, I'm Karabakh. I love that country, but I'm trying to say, as a person who has visited many places, the sincerity you will meet in Artsakh, that's something which is unique only to this piece of land. Thank you very much.